Mingalaba. So that means hello in Burmese, and I'm going to have all of you say that. Can you say Mingalaba? Okay, great. So my name is Kinne. I go by April. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my story before I tell you about transplanting traditions so that you can see how my story fits into the social landscape of our community at the farm and also our local refugee communities. I was born in Yangon, Burma, and I lived surrounded by family, friends, and communities until the age of 7 when my parents decided to emigrate our family of 4 here to the US to rebuild our lives on this little island in the middle of nowhere called Kauai, in the islands of Hawaii. And I intentionally say my parents decided to emigrate because for most of the time there's a distinction between immigrants and refugees. And so take my family, for example, we chose to move our lives and immigrate, whereas a lot of refugee folks, it's not a matter of choice, but a matter of survival. So growing up on Kauai, as most of you may have heard, it was quite the privilege to grow up in such a place that's so agriculturally abundant, and its natural beauty, as you may have heard, is really unparalleled. But it was an absolute privilege, especially because it's an environment that allows its communities to be connected to their land. And that's something that's shaped who I am today. And I like to make this disclaimer that, since my family decided to emigrate, that I'm not speaking as a refugee today, but I'm speaking as a community member of our refugee communities here. So growing up in Hawaii, not most people don't have much else to wish for, but there was this one thing that I had always really longed for, which was to be back home in my other home, Burma, or at least to be surrounded by communities that shared cultural roots of my family's. And so fast forward to, that's an important part because my family was actually the only family from Burma on the entire island of 60,000 people or so. And fast forward to 4 years ago, I landed up at the doorsteps of Hojo with nothing but a suitcase 6,000 miles from home. And without knowing this before I moved out here, I actually found myself amidst so many different communities from Burma all around me, which is what I always wanted growing up. And so I use the plural form of community when I say communities from Burma, is because I like to acknowledge that there's actually so many different communities in Burma. And most of the time we refer to them as Burmese, but there's actually dozens even of different ethnic states that make up Burma. And there's over 100 different languages. And these languages are so distinct that I can't understand or speak a lick of Gayen or Chin or Mon, which are some of the groups that comprise the local refugee communities from Burma here. So I point out our communities' language differences as an example to paint a broad picture of the complexities, or at least some of the complexities, that exist among our refugee communities in our local area from Burma, as well as many other different countries. And many communities actually come from dozens of different countries that make up our collective local refugee in our home in North Carolina. But since Transplanting Traditions is made up of refugee farmers from Burma, that's why I'll be focusing on refugee folks from Burma today. So earlier I taught y'all how to say hello, Mingalaba, in Burmese because most of our farmers from the farm actually work here on the UNC campus, and you probably bumped into some of them in the cafeterias or in the hallways. And so next time you see them, you can say Mingalaba. I know they always appreciate it, smile. a smiling person, and they're always impressed when someone says Mingalaba to them. So currently 35 families, refugee families from Burma, share 8 acres of land at Transplanting Traditions Community Farm. We grow vegetables that would be considered conventional to the American diet because a lot of our customers are Americans. But what makes our farm especially unique, and what I think makes it so beautiful, is the fact that we grow such a diversity of Southeast Asian vegetables that are unique to the farmers' cultures. It's the food that they're familiar with, it's the food that they grew back home and ate back home, and now they're able to do that here. We actually grow over 50 varieties of Southeast Asian vegetables, ranging from turmeric and water gourds to roselle and pennywort, and even most of us here might consider ourselves foodie. You probably have not heard of those things that I just named. And no other farm in North Carolina actually grows the variety of Southeast Asian vegetables that we grow at the farm at the scale that we're doing. And so some of our farmers farm at Transplanting Traditions to feed their families fresh and nourishing food that they would otherwise not have access to. And for some, it's really hard to find. Before the farm was created, it was hard to find the foods that they really longed for. And a lot of our farmers, of course, share the bounty back in our communities. And we also have a handful of farmers who are actually running their own businesses now and sell the vegetables and fruits that they're growing in their community-supported agriculture and also at the farmers markets. So when these farmers who are now running their businesses, it's a source of supplemental income, which is crucial for refugee folks because heads of refugee households, more often than not, very commonly hold 2 to 3 jobs to make ends meet because when you resettle in a completely foreign country, you're very limited what kind of employment opportunities are available to you. And so some of you may know that farming is hard labor. But despite the hard labor that it is, our farmers are happy and so grateful to have, they're so grateful to be able to continue using a trade and skills that they already brought with them, that they had developed and harnessed before being resettled here. And that's really important because for a lot of refugee folks, assimilation in a new country and resettling really strips you of your sense of self, your sense of agency, and your sense of value. And so our farmers, they plant and harvest by hand without any machinery. They use organic and sustainable methods. And so and that's especially hard work. And so they think it's worth it because the hardships and trauma of the entire journey of coming from your country of origin to your transitional country, where sometimes families spend up to a decade or more, and then being resettled in a completely new world, the journey is long from over when they're resettled. So navigating the lay of this new land, rebuilding home with a capital H, post-resettlement, it's really disorienting. It can be a grueling and demanding experience because refugee folks are having to rebuild their sense of self, their sense of agency, and their sense of community pretty much at every turn. And so from spending a lot of time with our local refugee communities from Burma, but also from other countries throughout my undergrad years, I've really heard from a lot of families and folks that a sense of community and rebuilding that where you're resettled makes all the difference in the world. And this sense of community is one of the things that the farmers have created at Transplanting Traditions, and it's one of the things that they deeply appreciate about the physical space and the opportunity to have access to this land. Because Transplanting Traditions Community Farm is not only a physical space to grow food, but it's where we eat and it's where we cook and eat meals together. It's where the farmers spend day in and day out together, through the hard times and through the breaks when we're just kind of hanging out on the farm and enjoying each other's company in this beautiful space. And they watch their children grow up together. And it's a place where people are rebuilding and growing as a community and as individuals. So the farmers cherish this opportunity to do work that's valuable to the greater community and makes them feel valuable. And a lot of them also say that just being in such a green, luscious space really improves their well-being and mental health from the stressors of daily, everyday life. So without access to land to grow their own food, a lot of refugee communities cannot access fresh foods that they're familiar with, that they ate back home, that they long for when they're resettled somewhere. There's lots of communities that might be resettled in a food desert, and all they really want is the food that they had back home, because we all know what comfort food feels like. And so I especially speak on behalf of all our other local refugee communities who are smaller in numbers and haven't established a community yet. And I know that they're longing for something like Transplanting Traditions. And so I'm sure some of you are familiar with the idea of food sovereignty. And so I personally think that the work that we're doing at Transplanting Traditions Farm, as well as similar work that's happening all over, is really an embodiment of food sovereignty, which is just ensuring that our communities have access to land and the resources that you need to be able to control your own food choices and your food systems while practicing ecologically sustainable methods. Jesu Demare, that's thank you in Burmese.